Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Sunday night. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire, Yehudit in South Carolina, Bilam in Missouri, Shandor in the Bronx, Paul in the Great Northwest, Sharon in New Jersey, Melissa in Great Neck, Chaim in Florida, Ella's in the house, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia, and Melissa in Great Neck, and Joe in the Inland Empire, and Lucy in Minnesota. Welcome, everybody. Our daf is... page 4, Daf Dalet, here in Tractate Bava Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. We are continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 1, and we've been proving, right, the sages are proving how this Kal V'chomer inference works. So we saw that by Torah law, one who admits that he owes part of a claim can be made to swear an oath that he doesn't deny the rest, right? Where we don't have witness evidence, right? Eyewitness evidence that the loan was extended or the deposit was made. So this one, it's just his word against his word. And he admits, and somebody says, you owe me $100. And the guy says, well, I owe you 50. So he pays the 50, and then he has to swear an oath that he does not owe the remaining 50, and then he doesn't have to pay. If he's swearing a false oath, in his own, accounting of deeds that he'll have to make before the heavenly tribunal upon leaving this world, it'll certainly be held against him. It'll be balanced out, God willing, by his many good deeds. But a false oath is a very serious matter. So rather than swear a false oath, the person who's not sure, is no, maybe I do owe the other 50. I don't want to swear falsely. I'll just pay it. Or he's certain and he swears the oath. Now that we've established that law, what if he doesn't admit that he owes, somebody says you owe 100 and he, instead of admitting that he owes 50, two witnesses come forward and they say, well, we saw that guy lent you $50. So now the 50 is established by the testimony of two witnesses. Do we then make him swear an oath for the remaining 50 in that situation, like we did with the partial admission? It would seem yes, but the Gemara is having some difficulty proving it because it's not a conclusive proof, and it's looking at related laws to see if we can work it out that way. So we pick this up at the very bottom of page 3b. Where it says, what is notable about the testimony of a single witness? Right now, by the testimony of a single witness, generally speaking, we can't establish anything in a Beis Din, in a rabbinic court, with certain exceptions, like a witness comes and says about a woman's husband, I saw he was killed in the war. I'm the only witness. There's not going to be another witness, so she can be remarried based on that testimony, but she's taking a chance that if her husband actually does return and the one witness was wrong, she would have to divorce both the second husband and would not be permitted to marry the first. Be a huge problem. But generally speaking, we don't establish anything, but that's a leniency for her, so that if there's only going to be that one witness, she shouldn't be a stranded wife waiting forever, for news that her husband died or isn't coming home, and, she's just stuck. But generally speaking, one witness doesn't do anything. However, if the one witness is the person himself, so we've seen, if he admits he owes part of the claim, he can be made to swear. He's established that, right? He's going to have to pay the part that he admits, and then he has to swear an oath about the rest. So, what is notable about the testimony of one witness? It is notable in that the defendant takes an oath with regard to the matter concerning which he testifies, not with regard to other claims raised by the claimant, right? Someone who has one witness maybe can get this guy, if it's himself, to swear about that he doesn't know the rest of this claim. But can the plaintiff say, well, now that I've got you in court, there's a whole other loan that we should talk about. I lent you that other time. Swear that you don't know that. right? And maybe there wouldn't be a situation where he'd have to swear an oath on the second claim, but now that he's already swearing claims, maybe he has to swear additional claims. We learned that out from the case of the Sota, the suspected adulteress, that once she's swearing that she didn't cheat with a particular guy on her husband, she can be asked other questions. What about, did you cheat with him or did you cheat with that guy? And she has to swear that she's innocent and has never committed adultery. Now, rather, Rab Papa said, Rabbi Chia's, and now we are on 4a, Rabbi Chia's Kal v'chomer inference is derived from the extension of an oath that the testimony of one witness obligates him to take. Once a defendant is obligated to take an oath, the plaintiff can demand that he take an oath with regard to other claims that he has against him as well, right? So maybe not everybody holds that way, but Rabbi Chia does, or at least Rav Papa does. So the Gemara rejects this. What is notable about the extension of an oath that is obligated by the testimony of one witness? It is notable in that one oath leads to another oath. So the obligation to take the second oath is not caused directly by the witness, but rather now that he's swearing an oath, now we can ask him to swear a different oath. But just one witness wouldn't normally trigger that. Would you say the same in the case of witnesses, two witnesses, whose testimony renders the defendant liable to pay money? Once we establish a matter by the testimony of two witnesses, if they say he owes, he owes. Incurring liability to pay one part of the claim does not extend further and incur liability to pay the rest the way two witnesses would. So the Gemara responds, the admission of one's mouth, right, one's own confession, can prove that an element other than an oath can cause the defendant to be obligated to take an oath with regard to the rest of the claim. So although the Kal v'chomer inference with from admission alone was already rejected due to the claim of what is notable about the admission of one's mouth, it is notable in that it is not subject to contradiction, as opposed to two witnesses can be contradicted and if they're shown to be conspiring witnesses. The testimony of one witness can prove that even testimony that is subject to contradiction can render one liable to take an oath. And the Kal v'chomer inference from the testimony of one witness was also rejected, as what is notable about the extension of an oath resulting from the testimony of a single witness. It is notable in that the defendant takes an oath with regard to the matter concerning that which he testifies. Would you say the same with regard to two witnesses? In which case the defendant takes an oath with regard to the claim that he denies. Admission to part of a claim by one's mouth can prove this difference irrelevant, as a defendant can be required to take an oath even with regard to a claim that he denies. And now that we've gone through the circle of all these attempts to prove the Kal v'chomer by a single source, we've come back to where we started. The derivation has reverted to its starting point. At this point, the law is derived not from a single source, but from a combination of two sources. And the aspect of this case, admission, right, one who admits to part of a claim, is not like the aspect of that case, the extension of an oath resulting from the testimony of a single witness. And the aspect of that case is not like the aspect of this case. So their common denominator is that these cases come before the court with a claim and its denial, and the defendant is obligated to take an oath. So I will also include in the obligation to take an oath the case of Rabbi Chia, where there is testimony of two witnesses about part of the debt, which comes before the court with the claim and its denial. And therefore the defendant is obligated to take an oath. And this is the inference to which Rabbi Chia was referring. But the Gemara rejects this argument. What is notable about their common denominator, i.e. the common denominator shared by admission to part of a claim by the defendant and the extension of an oath resulting from the testimony of a single witness, it is notable in that the defendant does not assume the presumptive status of one who falsely denies his debts. He has not proven to be lying, so he is trusted to take an oath. Would you say the same with regard to the case of two witnesses who contradict the defendant's denial of the plaintiff's claim, where the defendant assumes the presumptive status of one who falsely denies his debts? In this case, he is no longer deemed trustworthy, and his oath may not be credible, right? If two witnesses establish he was lying, well, then he's an established liar. If we only have, contradictory testimony and he's going to have to swear an oath that he doesn't owe more than that, we never established him as a liar. Now the Gemara asks, but in a case where his denial is contradicted by two witnesses, does he assume the presumptive status of one who falsely denies his debt? I mean, what if he was just making a mistake? But doesn't Rav Idi bar Avin say that Rav Chisda says, one who denies a claim that he received a loan and is contradicted by witnesses, he is fit to bear witness in a different case. He does not assume the status of a confirmed liar, as perhaps he intended to return the money afterward, and he denied the claim only in order to buy time until he acquired the necessary funds to repay the loan. By contrast, if one denies receiving a deposit, and witnesses testify that he is lying, he is disqualified from bearing witness in other cases, as in that case, he has no reason to buy time, and he is clearly a robber. And therefore, Rabbi Chia's kal v'chomer inference stands. Right? Very different, one who denies receiving a loan compared to one who denies receiving a deposit. Right? The one who received a deposit, if he used it, that was already an illegitimate act. One who received a loan, okay, he can't pay right now. That doesn't mean that, he's done something wrong. Now, when he falsely denies that he received the loan, that does seem questionable. But this idea that psychologically he was just playing for time seems to make him less of a dishonest, less of a falsifying person than one who was expected to just hold on to some money for someone and used it. And now he denies that he ever received it. So you could see that denial, that falsehood is on a different level than one who, claims he didn't receive a loan. Now, that would make Rabbi Chia's kal v'chomer work, except that the Gemara rejects this. No, this is not difficult, as Rabbi Chia does not refute this inference based on the punishment accompanying the laws of conspiring witnesses. In other words, Rabbi Chia does not accept this refutation, as while this law does not apply at all to the admission of a defendant, it does apply to the testimony of a single witness, in that if two witnesses testify that the single witness is a conspiring witness, his testimony is rendered void. Now the Gemara asks, but with regard to that which was stated on page 3a, okay, never mind. Where am I? With regard to that which was stated on page 3a, and the Tan of the Mishna also taught a similar law to that of Rabbi Chia, there's a difficulty. Is the case of the Mishnah comparable to the law of Rabbi Chia? There, in the case of witnesses to a loan, the creditor has witnesses to support his claim that there was a loan, while the debtor does not have witnesses to support his claim that he does not owe the creditor anything. As if the debtor had witnesses to support his claim that he does not owe the creditor anything, Rabbi Chia would not require him to take an oath. By contrast, here in the case of the Mishnah, just as it is clear to us that this claimant has a right to the garment, our Mishnah, right where we started, Mishnah number 1 in chapter 1, two people holding a garment, each claiming they found it, and that they are entitled to all of it. Right, so by contrast, here in the case of the Mishnah, just as it is clear to us that this claimant has a right to the garment as he is holding it, so too it is clear to us that the other claimant has a right to the garment as he also is holding it. And yet, nevertheless, in the Mishnah, each party is required to take an oath. So rather, when the phrase was stated, and the Tana of the Mishnah also taught a similar law, it was stated with regard to another statement of Rabbi Chia. As Rabbi Chia says, if one says to another, I have 100 dinars in your possession, and the other one says in response, you have only 50 dinars in my possession, and here you are, handing him the money. So he is obligated to take an oath that he does not owe the remainder, right? He admits to a partial claim. He has to take a note that he doesn't owe the remainder. Now, what is the reason? One who says, here you are, while immediately giving the money, is also considered like one who admits to part of the claim. It cannot be reasoned that by immediately handing over the amount to which he admits, that the defendant thereby reduces the claim by the 50 dinars that he denies owing, and he is consequently exempt from taking an oath, like any defendant who denies the claim entirely. And concerning this ruling of Rabbi Chia, the Gemara comments, and the Tana of the Mishnah taught a similar halacha, a similar law, citing the Mishnah beginning, if two people come to court holding a garment. The Gemara explains the comparison. And here in the Mishnah, since each one grasps half the garment, it is clear to us that what one grasps is in his possession, just as if the other one had said to him, here you are, I am giving it to you. And the Mishnah teaches that he takes an oath. So evidently, in a case where one denies part of a claim that is brought against him, and with regard to the rest of the claim, he says to the claimant, here you are, he is obligated to take an oath. And Rav Sheshes says, one who says about part of the claim, here you are, and denies the rest of the claim, is exempt from taking an oath about the rest. And what is the reason? Since he said to him, here you are, those dinars that he admitted to owing are considered as if the creditor has them in his possession already. And with regard to the other 50 dinars, the defendant did not admit to owing them. Therefore, there is no admission to part of the claim. And the Gemara asks, but according to the opinion of Rav Sheshes, the Mishnah is difficult, as it seems to be a comparable case, and yet an oath is required. And the Gemara answers, Rav Sheshes could have said to you, the oath mentioned in the Mishnah is a rabbinic ordinance, which pertains specifically to that case. In general, a debtor who immediately hands over the money that he admits to owing is exempt from taking an oath, according to Rav Sheshes. And how would the other Amora, Rabbi Chia, respond to this assertion? Indeed, he would agree that it is a rabbinic ordinance. However, granted, if you say that by Torah law, one who says, here you are, is obligated to take an oath, that explains why the sages instituted the oath mentioned in the Mishnah, as it is similar to an oath administered by Torah law. But if you say that by Torah law, one who says, here you are, is exempt from taking an oath, would the sages institute an oath that has no corresponding oath in Torah law? Clearly, there is a basis for the oath instituted by the sages in Torah law. And that basis is the case where the defendant says, here you are. Now, the Gemara raises an objection to the opinion of Rabbi Chia from a Baraisa, right, contemporaneous with the Mishnah. Now we're on page 4b. If it is written in a promissory note that one borrowed an unspecified amount of salayim, coins, or that one borrowed an unspecified amount of dinars, a different kind of coin, and the creditor says, I lent you 5 selah, and the debtor says, you lent me only 3. In this case, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, since the debtor admitted to part of the claim, he takes an oath. Rabbi Akiva says, since the wording of the note indicates only that he owes 2 dinars, the minimum plural amount, by admitting that he owes 3, he is merely the equivalent of one returning a lost item, and he is exempt from taking an oath. Why is the claim that he is equivalent, right, this is a note from Rav Steinsaltz, why is the claim that he is equivalent to one returning a lost item not made with regard to every case of one who admits to part of the claim? And the Rambam explains that in most cases of one who admits to part of the claim, there is a presumption that one would not be so insolent to his creditor and deny his debt entirely. Here, where the note, the promissory note, supports his claim, the defendant might have the audacity to do so. Therefore, only here, if he admits to part of the claim, is he halachically equivalent to one returning a lost item. In any event, the Baraisa teaches that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, since the debtor admitted to part of the claim, he takes an oath. And this indicates that the reason he is obligated to take an oath is specifically because he said that he owes 3 dinars. But had he admitted to owing only 2, he would have been exempt from taking an oath. And concerning the minimal obligation recorded in this promissory note to which he admits, which is 2 dinars, it is as though he said, here you are. An obligation recorded in a promissory note is tantamount to an obligation concerning which the defendant says, here you are, here's the money I owe you. And therefore conclude from it that one who says, here you are, is exempt from taking an oath with regard to the part of the claim that he denies, right? This is deriving that one who says, somebody says, you owe me 100 dinars. This guy says, no, I owe you 50 dinars, and here you are. He hands it over. Now, so one argument, one side of this argument is, and that's like one who admits to a partial claim and he has to swear an oath to the rest. And the other view is, since he hands it over, that actually changes the situation, and he doesn't swear an oath about the rest. Now, the Gemara rejects this. No, actually, I will say to you that even if he admitted that he owes 2 dinars, he is obligated to take an oath. And the reason that the Brisa teaches the dispute specifically with regard to the case of 3 dinars is not to exclude a case where he admits that he owes only 2, but rather it is to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that he is the equivalent of one returning a lost item and he is therefore exempt. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar teaches us that he is considered like one who admits to part of the claim, and he is obligated to take an oath. And the Gemara asks, if so, the Baraisa should have been phrased differently. If the defendant is obligated to take an oath, even in a case where he admits that he owes 2 dinars, rather than stating Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, since the debtor admitted to part of the claim, he takes an oath, the Baraisa should have stated, even this one who admits to owing 3 dinars takes an oath, in addition to one who admits owing 2 dinars. Rather, since it wasn't stated that way, the explanation should be rejected. Actually, if he admits that he owes 2 dinars, he is exempt from taking an oath. But nevertheless, one who says, here you are, is obligated to take an oath. And the reason for this distinction is that here, the case is different, as the note supports him. I.e., it indicates that he owes 2 dinars. Therefore, he is exempt from taking an oath with regard to the rest. It's because he has the note. But if he didn't have the note and he said, here you are, then he would have to take the oath. Alternatively, if he admits to owing 2 dinars, he's exempt from a different reason, because a promissory note creates a lien on the debtor's land. And there is a principle that one does not take an oath with regard to a debtor's denial of a debt that is secured with a lien on land. Oaths are administered only when one denies owing money or movable property, right? So the kinds of loans that you would have that are not land and not secured by land. Just the loan was money or movable property. Now, there are those who raise an objection to Rav Shesh's opinion from the latter clause of this Baraisa, which teaches that Rabbi Akiva says he is merely the equivalent of one returning a lost item and he is exempt from taking the oath. And the Gemara infers the reason he is exempt is that he said that he owes 3 dinars, but had he admitted to owing only 2, he would have been obligated to take the oath. And concerning the minimal obligation recorded in this promissory note to which he admits, which is 2 dinars because it was stated as a plural, it is as though he said, here you are. And learn from it that one who says, here you are, is obligated to take the oath. Gemara says, no. Actually, I will say to you that if he admits that he owes 2 dinars, he is also exempt from taking an oath. And the reason the Baraisa teaches the dispute specifically with regard to the case of 3 dinars is to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says that he is considered one who admits to part of the claim and he is obligated to take an oath. Rabbi Akiva therefore teaches us that in his opinion, the defendant is the equivalent of one returning a lost item and he's exempt from taking an oath. Bottom line. This isn't over yet, but if we just want to track where we are, one who admits to owing a partial claim, certainly on a deposit, probably on a loan, right? He admits to a partial claim, so then he's liable to pay what he admits, and he swears an oath that he doesn't owe any more, and then he's excused by the rabbinic court from paying any more because he swore the oath. Where are we going to extend the swearing of an oath to? What other situations than that? Where witnesses establish that he owes a partial claim, where a single witness establishes that he owes a partial claim. Our Mishna is all about the fact that 2 people did find a lost object, not received a loan or a deposit. They're each holding it, so we know they're telling the truth about, at least half the claim because they're both holding on to it. They both say that they found it and are entitled to all of it. So we're going to say that your oath is you swear that you are entitled to no less than half of it. That way you're not going to contradict each other. There's no false oath being sworn. necessarily, right? We can have that situation without forcing somebody to swear a false oath. And then they can split either the garment, cut it in half, or we sell it and they split the proceeds. So that's another situation where we're going to, apply the oath. So the question we're really asking is, from that law, the partial admission, and then swearing an oath, which other situations are we going to impose the oath deriving the law from the first case? So where was I? I'm just going to start here just to get the rolling again, because I'm actually pretty close to the end anyway. So questions or comments, you should get them in short off today. So let's read this paragraph again. There are those who raise an objection to Rav Shesh's opinion from the latter clause of this Baraisa, which teaches that Rabbi Akiva says he is merely the equivalent of one returning a lost item, and he is exempt from taking an oath. And the Gemara infers the reason he is exempt is that had he said he owes 3 dinars, but had he admitted owing only 2, he would have been obligated to take an oath. And concerning the minimal obligation recorded in the promissory note to which he admits, which is 2 dinars, it is as though he said, here you are. So learn from it that one who says, here you are, is obligated to take the oath. The Gemara rejects this and says, no, actually I will say to you that if he admits that he owes 2 dinars, he is also exempt from taking an oath. And the reason that the Baraisa teaches the dispute is specifically with regard to the case of 3 dinars, teaches it that way, is to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says that he is considered one who admits to part of the claim, and he's obligated to take the oath. Rabbi Akiva therefore teaches us that in his opinion, the defendant is the equivalent of one returning a lost item, and he's exempt from taking the oath. So the Gemara comments, and so too it is reasonable to explain the Baraisa as it was just explained, as if it enters your mind that one who admits that he owes 2 dinars is obligated to take an oath, how does Rabbi Akiva deem him exempt in a case where he admits that he owes 3 dinars? Perhaps this debtor is employing artifice, thinking, if I say that I owe 2, I will be required to take an oath. Therefore, I will say that I owe 3, so that I will be considered equivalent to one returning a lost item, and I will be exempt from taking an oath. Rather, learn from it that even if he admits that he owes only 2 dinars, he is also exempt from taking an oath. The Gemara asks, but this explanation poses a difficulty to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that a defendant is obligated to take an oath in a case where he says, here you are. In other words, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is negated by the case of one who admits that he owes only 2 dinars, where he is exempt from taking an oath. So the Gemara answers, the case there is different, right? What's the difference between Rabbi Akiva's case and this, right? Rabbi Akiva's case, where he's ready to hand over the money, the difference between Rabbi Akiva's case, where he says, here you are, I only owe half of it, and here it is, versus what Rabbi Akiva is talking about, is because in Rabbi Akiva's situation, there's a promissory note. The promissory note had witnesses to it. So that changes the thing. It was left ambiguous, right? That's why there's a problem where we're going to say 2 dinars or 3, but that a debt exists, that's been established by the witnesses of the promissory note. And the Gemara answers, the case there is different as the note supports it, right? That's the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Akiva. Therefore, he is not required to take an oath. And alternatively, he is exempt because a promissory note creates a lien on the debtor's land. That's another big difference when you have a promissory note. And there's a principle that one does not take an oath with regard to a debtor's denial of a debt that is secured with a lien on land. Why we do that is for another day. That's just an established principle. Now, Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Nachman, raises an objection to the opinion of Rav Sheshes from a Mishna, tractate Shavuos 38b. If one claimed that another owed him vessels and land, and the defendant admitted to owing him vessels, but denied that he owes him land, or conversely, if he admitted to owing him land, but denied that he owes him vessels, he is exempt from taking an oath with regard to what he denies. If he admitted that he owes him part of the land, he is exempt. If he admitted to owing some of the vessels, he's obligated to take an oath with regard to the remainder, because one is movable property and the other is land. And the Gemara infers the reason he's exempt in the first case is because the claim is for vessels and land. As a claim with regard to land is not subject to an oath. But if the claim is for vessels and vessels, i.e. two sets of vessels, in a manner similar to the case of a claim for vessels and land, then he would be obligated to take an oath. What are the circumstances of such a case? Is it not a case where he said to him, here you are. Yes, I owe you some vessels, not as many as you're claiming, and here are the ones I owe you. And learn from the Mishnah that one who says, here you are, is nevertheless obligated to take an oath. It's like a partial admission of a claim, even if he says, here you are. And the Gemara answers, no, actually, I will say to you that if the claim is for vessels and vessels, he says, I owe you some vessels and here they are, but the other vessels I don't owe. Why doesn't he swear an oath? According to this, he is exempt. And the fact that the Mishnah teaches the case of vessels and land teaches us this different law. If he'd admitted that he owes some of the vessels and is therefore obligated to take an oath, he is also obligated to take an oath with regard to the land that he denied owing his creditor. Although in and of itself, one does not take an oath with regard to land. We wouldn't, if the claim was only for land, no oath would apply. But if the part of the oath is for vessels, now that he's swearing an oath about what vessels he owes and what he doesn't, if land was also part of the claim, he might have to, at least according to this view, he would have to make a note that he doesn't owe land, and then he would be able to get out of it. Right? Again, this is in the absence of witness testimony. That's what we've got for today, and we're going to pick it up tomorrow, Monday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. This is not easy stuff, but you can see how hard the sages are working to understand, okay, exactly when do we impose an oath on a defendant, and when do we not? What circumstances do we know we do it? What circumstances do we have a dispute about whether we do it or not? And where are we going to learn out that it's, accepted practice according to the majority or according to a particular minority that we do extend the oath or that we don't, right? They're being very careful before they make a defendant swear an oath because oaths are serious business. Okay. Questions on Bava Metzia, page 4, while my Google Doc reloads. Tom, wouldn't this give the borrower an incentive to shortchange the lender and consequently make the lender much less likely to lend to that borrower in the future? You're saying, right, so what you're saying is if he can get away with only paying back part of the loan by swearing falsely that he doesn't owe any more than what he's prepared to admit, yeah, a person could get away with that. Right? But this is a law. This law, as it is established, for example, for deposits, that's in the Torah, right? That's by written Torah law from God. So, and where is this going to be applied? In a Beis Din. Now, remember that we also had very important principle that we learned toward the end of Tractate Bava Kama, the Dina de Malchus Dina, right? So certainly in the diaspora, and even in Israel today, because there's a civil law there that's imposed by the government, right? People, are going to be subject to the laws of the land in civil courts that do have enforcement power, right? They can rely on sheriffs and policemen to enforce power. That when there's a ruling and the person doesn't want to pay, they can, take it. So who is it that's going to be submitting their case to a Beis Din in modern times when you could litigate in civil court? Right? These are pious people who are going to submit to the authority of the rabbis. They're not going to be so quick to swear falsely. Right, so if we're talking about God-fearing people, they will really think twice. They will not be so quick to swear falsely in order to evade a debt, because it's very serious business. And even if a person might think, yeah, whatever, I'll just lie. And then when he's standing in front of the person who lent him money and in front of, these august judges, sages of the community, who are going to read, a statement to him, like what it means to swear falsely and that this will hang over you for the rest of your life, he might not be so quick to swear falsely. Bill. Question. Let us suppose that the creditor said, I loaned you some drachmas. And the debtor said, no, you loaned me some dinars. Where the two parties agree on the number of coins, but not the currency, do we say that they agree on the substance of the claim? Yeah, I would say that there's a smaller included amount, right? Like one of the coins is worth more than the other, right? So if one says, I owe you, 3/4, and the other one says, no, you owe me $3 silver. Okay, so then what's the difference between them? One admits that he owes 75 cents. The other one says you owe me $3. So this is like pay the 75 cents, right? Pay the smaller coins, and then swear an oath about the remaining amount. I would think that's the way it plays out, unless, right, there's the sort of the lexicon and the verbiage of that region, which would lead us to think, oh, something else was going on here. And it's not as simple as what I just said. Rebecca, I think, and someone correct me because I was late, this is saying where the boundary of which set of rules apply based on the value and other details. So there's a set of rules for land, one for debts, one for lost items, but there's overlap between the situations. That's an excellent summary. Yes, exactly. It's slightly different rules. Like we're talking about somebody has property that's currently in the possession of another, or what one claims that something that he owns is now in the possession of someone else, either because he lent it to him, movable property or money, or because he deposited it with him, or because he lost it and that one found it, or because that guy robbed it. Right? So there's all these different reasons how that guy could end up in possession of this one's property, and then he can admit or deny or partially admit, right? And depending on what his claim is and what evidence there is, we're going to see how these different, custodial arrangements ended up there, and how that, creates variance in the outcome, whether that one can be made to swear an oath or not, whether he's made to pay immediately or not, etc. That's what I've got for us today, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Monday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific.